welcome to Other Lands Editing Podcast, where two speculative fiction writers and editors help you craft fantastical worlds by keeping an eye on exacting editing and foundational writing principles. Every 2 weeks, we bring you interviews with other writers, advice on editing and writers' craft pitfalls, and reviews of popular media to help you grow. So sit back, relax, and join Margaret Bates and Midnight Voss as we discuss all things writing and editing. Today, we are going to be looking at some of the Bonkers assortment of different Christmas movies that Netflix and some from Freeform, not many, and definitely Hallmark have gifted us with over the years. And we've broken them down from kind of bonkers to all the way crazy, and we'll be having a journey with that, won't we, Midnight? I guess we'll start with the ones that are weird or just don't quite understand human behavior and then get to extremely crazy as we go. Always fun to ramp up. So I think the first one we had talked about, I mean, we've seen all of these, so it's been a pretty busy Christmas season so far. But we had talked about one called The Mistletoe Inn, which was from the Hallmark Channel a few years back. And do you want to give a basic gist of the plot?
Oh gosh. Basically, you have a writer who has just been dumped, goes to a writer's conference, in quotes, and runs into a guy who's kind of a jerk, but then becomes her like writing buddy. And it turns out that he is the amazing specialty author who's going to present at the conference, and she's trying to get into this contest where he will be able to read and evaluate her writings, but she's secretly met him already. So that's basically the gist.
Yeah, no, that's a much bigger plot summary than I would have done, but you really remembered it. But I've seen it a few times. It's around, I'd say 5 or 6 years. 'Cause I remember the year it came out, I was actively part of before it went real bad, the Romance Writers of America. So our local chapter, we all talked about it at the Christmas dinner, how funny we thought it was, and how like not necessarily realistic it was to how writing actually works, which continues to baffle me because obviously the people who wrote it are writers, but I guess there is a difference between knowing how to screenwrite and knowing how to write for romance and knowing the romance novel industry. And it's not like all of
Or
it is
knowing how to
wrong.
Google and find out what happens at a writing conference.
Yeah,
Um,
so
like as
yeah.
you said, the Romance Writers Association still existed. You could Google, find their website, and realize that they have many, many speakers and events there, and it's not actually just what would you really actually call that? Because it's not a conference.
Almost like a glorified workshop. Because, yeah, there's a couple of speaking engagements, or there's one kind of group thing a day, but most of it looks like the intensive classes where you do the things as a group, where she was doing it with her friend. And unfortunately, her ex, who is that guy in your MFA class as
Oh yeah.
well, and they would have activities to work on overnight and then come back and talk about it. So it feels more like a writer's retreat with intensive workshops and one special guest speaker than anything more comprehensive than that. Because, yeah, you're right. At a regular writers' conference, especially one of any size, you have like scheduled seminars each day for 4 or 5 hours around the lunch break. And if it's a real big one like RWA or a regional kind of thing for like a statewide organization, you may have competing tracks. So you could choose different workshops all day in different locations, depending on if you're more into marketing or into the craft of it or things like that. And this was just like, here's our one speaker, and he's also a secret because that makes the sort of semi mistaken identity theme funnier, I guess. It was just
Yeah,
didn't
it's
get
like
it.
if it was Chuck Tingle, but it's, I don't know, not because they don't know what he looks like because he stayed out of social media somehow, but they know his name because he uses, I don't remember which part of his name, a part of his name that isn't obvious to his regular name. So
Yeah,
they don't really know who he is.
his name is Hezekiah, which is a totally normal name to have, but he goes by Zeke with his friends. But his writing name is like H whatever his last name is. So it's kind of like he goes by his writing initials. And I guess theoretically, because this again I think is from like 2018 or 19, because again I hadn't left the RWA before then. So in a pre-TikTok is everything for book marketing world, which you may become again, that's another story. I don't think you needed to have your face on your social media. And to be fair, authors out there, a lot of authors who are romance authors and worry that they might have conflicts with where they work, like if they work federal jobs or government jobs or academic jobs where there's been a lot of shame in that as a side
Yeah.
hustle or side venture, they still will use logos. Obviously, queer authors do that as well because sometimes queer authors we don't want associated with our legal or real names just because there is so much discrimination, which unfortunately is also ramping up right now. That way you could create social media presences and still could with an emblem or a symbol or a this is my branding, but you don't see my face. But I do think it is more of a sign of the times that for a mainstream het romance writer who was such a big deal, like the publishing house was like, we're going to put out a 700-page compendium of all his works, blah, 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 for a new Christmas special
That
edition.
sounds like an insane thing that no one would ever buy.
I know, right?
And
But
she's like, just do it, put it out.
they
It doesn't matter to me.
people have seen his face. If not on social media, like he'd been on, he was successful enough to go on Good Morning America or Oprah or whoever and buy my book. So it's a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah, so the reason that this is on our list as bonkers is because of all those little things that don't really add up about the writing industry and that they never bothered to look into. Another thing that struck me about it is that she gets to meet these, I don't know, publishers for 5 seconds. And have I ever been in one of those? I've been one of those for in the academic sense where you have a professional at the table with a couple of people and they talk about your work. And so the way they did it was it like a firing squad. You waited out in line and then they read your work and then they shoot a couple of things at you and you're like, get out. So what is that? I think
I
that those things were in there just to make her feel they did it for the character.
Yeah, I will say that I have been at several different pitch meetings. I'm like where you go in and you book a cattle call and you've got a project and you pitch it to an agent at a conference. I've done it over Zoom with the Emerald Writers Romance Conference a few years back, and I did it a couple times with the RWA. I just got busy, never had to finish the book. It's a long story. But even when you do that, it's really we've got 5 minutes. There's 100 other people booked after you. This is your 5 minutes. Give us your pitch. We'll ask a few questions, and then you go on with your day. And they either say, yes, send me something, or, it might not be for me, but they don't do all of a sudden as if you're going in for your comps in the PhD program, like a bunch of deep grilling. They're too busy. So it is really odd how much they don't you're right, bothered to Google and understand about writing. And I just always remembered that about this girl. And it's not that she doesn't know not to go to this conference. It's not that she doesn't learn things, but this is literally like the first draft of her first book that she's finished. And she set it in New York at Christmas time, but she's never actually been to the city of New York, which is a plot point. She seems really disappointed with herself when she actually does good on certain of the contests, which is here's our workshop class day. Go home and describe a dialogue or a Christmas scene. And she has raw talent, but she seems a little bit like she's over expecting what might happen out of this whole process because it really is the first draft of her first book and to expect to win or to place was probably overestimating, which some young writers do feel. It's just that at the end Simi, because she has a connection to Hezekiah, the author guy who was kind of incognito, she does eventually kind of get an offer as part of the Christmasiness of it all to publish her first book. I think upon understanding she'd do revisions, but with a smaller press. And I always found that was kind of stupid. But as Midnight points out, if it is a smaller press and they're trying to become up and coming and they see potential in her work to work with her on the revisions, that does make more sense than, as I like to call them, the Randy Penguin or Random House Penguin is going to publish your first book that you finished a first draft of. That is true. That is more fair.
Yeah, so saying that it was a smaller press, that was the one concession where it made sense. So he can't just offer it to her from something big because that would literally never happen. At some point, someone touched grass and they were like, well, it should be a smaller press that's looking to acquire a few people and he has connections. And that's a really great way to come around after that third act breakup and get in good with her because what other love interest is able to fully further her career? Usually she will give up her entire life to go live on his Christmas farm.
I feel like that is a great point that almost every single one of these is she's the busy, usually it's almost always New York. Like I would say 8 times out of 10 it's New York, but she's always the busy CEO or up and comer. She works at an ad agency. She almost always works for ad agency or real estate. But she decides within 2 weeks to leave it all behind for some dude in nowhere or Noelville or whatever. And it's just almost always her
Hmm.
career has to settle. And so this is one where he actually, in a mostly ethical way, is able to help her career by kind of afterwards becoming a partner with her and helping her sort of redevelop things for this small press. And that was nice that it was supportive of her career.
I will say also that as we're kind of like ragging on them for their inaccuracies, there were a couple of moments with some of the characters that I felt like I haven't been to that many writing conferences. I've been to more academic conferences, but there were a couple of characters where it feels, yeah, that's dead on. And you mentioned the ex-boyfriend who's basically the guy in your MFA who thinks he's so much better than he actually is. And the only thing that he ever won on that was where he got to describe something. So it feels like he's the guy who's coming in there like romance isn't that hard, and really all his experience is not really in the genre. Um,
Yeah,
and
he
then
does have that. He
and that
definitely has that mix of that MFA guy who's just so convinced he's amazing. You know what I mean?
yeah. I was
He's
also
got
gonna call out the first lady that she meets where she's like, so you've not written any books yet. You've never published yet? Okay. Of like that kind of like jockeying for who cares? But there's always somebody there who thinks they're so much better because they got one book published already, so they feel like they're above everybody else.
exactly. It's obviously a Hallmark romance, so the only characters it focuses on for any real depth are mostly the heroine and Hezekiah, the hero. I just like saying his name because it's such I would never hear that outside of the Bible or an Amish community. But they do a few good smatterings. Like again, the guy not from your MFA who's her ex is relatable to any snotty, I only read literature dude you've ever met. The girl who's her friend who's helping her in the co-submitting pieces for the contest together, she's nice, she's relatable. It's nice to see her also find someone who's supporting her bookish interests. So there's kind of a variety of the I guess, types of people you
Yeah.
might meet
They
in the
could have done
literary
more
world.
development of some of those characters. I would have liked to see the snotty Southern lady either become a villain or show that other side to her
Yeah,
of she's not just that, of it's just she comes in there and she's like because she does have more experience actually, and maybe she does have some good advice to give, but as a rom-com, so they're not that interested. They have to go walk around in the snow and throw snowballs at each other and describe candles. So
yeah. I do appreciate he does take her to New York City so she can actually see where she's trying to describe for her book because she obviously on first time out, if she's never been to New York, she gets it completely wrong. And that brings me to the small point for writers that is completely Hallmark adjacent is just if you're going to write about a location, obviously you can't go everywhere. If you're writing science fiction or fantasy, you can't go to the magical world in your head. But it does help sometimes if you get a sense of place, whether that's by talking to people who live there, whether it's by watching movies set there, doing actual research and books. And I swear a lot when I used to have to write a lot of books set in the Middle East, to which I have never been. Fromers and Lonely Planet guides were very helpful to me. And also at the time, Flickr, because they had a lot of images there, but any place like I guess Instagram more now, where you can see images taken by people at the site. So you get angles that aren't just the official brochure pictures.
our next is like a pair because I'd recommend you watch the second one. But our next set is The Nine Lives of Christmas and The Nine Kittens of Christmas. Can you tell us a
Yeah.
general?
Well, I like to say the nine lives of Christmas can be summed up with Hi, hunky firefighter, we should date because our cats like each other. But to be a little less flippant, Brandon Routh, who you may or may not know from Legends of Tomorrow, but probably kind of remember from that Superman movie from the mid 2000s, is a firefighter who is the typical kind of rakish character. He's not mean or he's not like prolific with his girlfriends by any means, but he's definitely the I want to be a confirmed bachelor for the rest of my life, mostly because he has man pain from his parents' divorce. But he ends up meeting a veterinarian student named Marley, and he meets her because a cat named Ambrose has decided to become friends with him. Like Ambrose, I think, gets as far as the fire station, kind of becomes Brandon Routh's character's problem. His name is Zach. Basically, the cat adopts himself out to Zach after his owner is incapacitated. So Zach has to take care of this cat, just not do it. Ends up going to the cat food or the grocery store as you do, and has to meet cute with Marley, and she gives him advice. And from there, they kind of blossom because she, as well, has a cat named Queenie, and the cats get along. And eventually, because of reasons and shenanigans, Marley gets evicted because her apartment finds out she has a cat. It's a big thing, and so of course she has to move in with the hunky firefighter and help him renovate the house he's flipping over Christmas. So as they get closer and his feelings get more obvious, they kind of struggle with his issues to not want to commit versus him actually liking her and the cat in the background being cute. That's the plot, if you could call it a plot.
Yeah, and then the next movie, it's what, it's like 7 years later, and she's
Mhm.
finished vet school, and he's still a firefighter flipping houses. And so she went away to go do vet things, and now she's back, and he's kind of doing the same thing, except in this one, there are 9 kittens around. She has another cat, and those cats are actively pushing them to be together. Like the cats are swatting at their phone, so they'll answer their phone or throwing the phone out of the purse so that she'll call him. They're like, okay, we've had enough. Just settle.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I will specify that the 9 kittens are foundlings because in the interim, 7 years, poor Queenie, she dies, sorry, and Marilyn gets a new cat, Duchess. But these kittens are not either Duchesses or Ambroses. They're found in a box, and so the big MacGuffin is to find them new homes. But so they don't want to not work together until they find all the homes. So as long as the kittens are outstanding, they're sort of forced proximity via kitten. So they rekindle what fell apart, which is mostly she wanted to finish vet school, create her own practice, move on in her life, got this posting in Miami, and he wanted things to stay the same. I think, to be fair to Zach as a character, it's not because he's lazy. I mean, he does technically in the interim go from regular firefighter to fire captain, I guess, if that
Yeah,
helps.
yeah.
But it's more, I think, again, some of that trauma from his parents' divorce where he gets nervous about rocking the boat, or if you ask for more, things just fall apart anyway. Except I think a lot of the theme of the second movie, where it is again 7 years later and they've kind of parted for a while and thought they were never going to get back together, is that if you don't make a decision and you're too scared to commit or do things, then eventually they fall apart on their own. So he was really struggling with that. But yeah, it was like he was more stagnated than she was, and that was there. I will say this is another movie where the heroine, she does move back from Miami back to her original home in Oregon, which is where her sister is anyway. The reason she comes back at all is to visit her sister for Christmas. But she gets to keep her career. Like she's realized she doesn't want to be an owner of a vet practice, just kind of work at one. It's too much to do the management side. She's able to rent the practice of a recently retired vet in town. So no one asks her to stop having her job. She just gets to do less paperwork going forward. He
She was
does make
planning on coming back before they had solidified that they were gonna be a thing. Like she was tired of that. And I'll also give him credit because the problem with Zach's character is that he is also on his level of his career afraid to move forward. You said he's the chief. He's
yeah.
the captain, but he's being offered the opportunity to be the chief, and he's afraid to take it.
Yeah, he's
Of like,
afraid of that as
no,
well.
this is a promotion, man, to take it. But he's hesitant to even do that. So it's a pervasive little fear of just taking steps forward because what
Yeah.
we have is fine.
Yeah, it's not a love problem where he just relays on women as much as he's just afraid of anything career or love life getting too mixed up or risking things. But I do think it is a good little moral that, not making a decision is ultimately also a decision. But the cats, I think the reason you like 9 kittens better, and I do too. I hadn't seen it until this year, but I'd seen 9 Lives every year because Katie and I love to watch it and think it's funny. The cats are more active, especially Ambrose, and like literally playing Cupid this time around.
It's so cute. They definitely got a no between those movies of like, oh, I thought the cats were going to be more involved.
Because at some point towards the third act breakup, she decides to call him. And I know Duchess somehow throws the phone to her as a hint, which is okay. But then on the other end, when he gets the phone, he lets it go to his voicemail and listens on speaker. And like Ambrose, when it starts dialing, he doesn't want to answer it on his end. Ambrose, the cat, touches it with his paw, so it goes on and then shoves it to him with batting his paw at it. They're definitely much more matchmakery as cats in this one than Ambrose and the previous Queenie were in the first one. So that was
And
funny.
Ambrose played himself because now he has to live with 2 other cats he doesn't know.
Yeah, no, now he has to live with a kitten named Rudolph, yes, like the reindeer, and Duchess, whom he has never met because obviously he only knew Queenie. So yeah, now Ambrose won himself 2 new cats to live with forever. So
Friends.
friends, but it is cute, and I am a big fan of Brandon Routh. I wasn't a big fan of Superman Returns because I don't think anybody ever was, but I have always really enjoyed the CW show Legends of Tomorrow, where he really got to do his comedy chops, and there's not a lot to work with in Hallmark because he's not that funny, but he is very charming and very underrated as an actor. So it was nice to see him in a movie with cute kittens. I guess the next one that's escalating kind of crazy, but we're not full tilt yet, is a movie that just came out this year for Netflix with Christina Milian called Meet Me Next Christmas. And I actually really enjoyed that because I think it doesn't really it's not super satirical and it's not deconstructing the holiday movie, but it is adding, as weird as this sounds, a level of realism to a movie where the relationship makes a little more sense. Do you want to tell us what the sort of plot of Meet Me Next Christmas is, Midnight?
Okay. So, well, the plot gives us a little bit about why this is on our bonkers list. And it's basically she meets a guy in a cafe one year, but they're both dating someone, and they decide to leave it up to fate so that they'll meet again. By the next year, she's gotten dumped or something. So she decides to go. She knows he's going to go to that dumb Pentatonics concert. So she decides to move heaven and earth to get tickets to this Pentatonics concert so that they can meet up again by chance and basically force fate, like on the level of people doing kind of crazy things. It's like the crazy ex-girlfriend kind of thing, except she hasn't ever met him. She's going out of her way to make this happen, make the Christmas magic happen. But at the same time, she met the actual love interest at that same diner and then runs into him again when she's trying to find those tickets. So fate is still there. You were just so focused on trying to force it that you missed what you were supposed to be looking for.
Yeah, and I will say he comes into the picture, the helper who becomes the actual love interest over time, because he works, it's not quite TaskRabbit, but it's some sort of like concierge service where they're supposed to be able to get you the impossible. I didn't know those were a thing in big cities, but I guess they are, at least for the purpose of this film. So he's kind of the guy who's supposed to find connections to get her these tickets. But instead of all just hit up a contact at StubHub, it becomes we're gonna do weird, crazy things all over New York City to try and get the tickets. They somehow meet a contact who he gets other things where who are also rich, and they are weirdly coded as almost like vampiric. They're like these weird rich couple. They've got vaguely European accents. They've got this great penthouse in Manhattan she's gonna offer, and does end up giving Christine Milian a dress to wear that's like this luxurious. I want to say it's like a red sequin number or so. It's just insane. And at first I'm like, are they gonna get bitten? But their test for them is to go and line up
I
at like
thought
a
they were going to ask
department.
them to swing.
Yeah, like I'm there, yeah, department store and get a special edition, special Christmas purse, which doesn't work out. None of these work out until it finally does. And they also have to go because his cousin might know of a lead on tickets, but it turns out it means they have to enter a singing contest at traditionally a drag bar, but not all the acts are drag acts because his cousin is a drag performer, but he got barred from last year from getting into a fight. His cousins work around and they do place pretty well, but I respected the movie. It's like, no, 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 the actual drag queen who really brought it and Slade is the one who's going to win the contest. So they don't all of a sudden usurp her queer space and then win. But you can see the kind of bonkers things they have to do, or even the smaller things where she's found tickets on Craigslist turns into, oh no, we got fleeced by a con man at the bar, but she can't time getting her pepper spray out correctly, so she accidentally pepper sprays the TaskRabbit guy, who's also her potential romantic lead or her concierge
Yeah, he gets pepper
ticket finder.
sprayed and knocked in the balls and like all kinds of things. Like he's taking
Yeah,
it.
he does. He really takes
Like, what did
it.
he do wrong?
So it is bonkers because they're basically over this insane scavenger hunt in New York to get these tickets, which, spoiler alert, they do get, but they get it because of essentially really pentatonics.
Yeah, they're characters in this, but it's like slightly, and then they have this, I don't know, weird thing where they just sort of break into song at random, driving their PR person crazy.
Which is hilarious. But they are following him because I think in his desperation, as this started to go even worse, he DM'd them on Twitter. And then they started just watching as this would unfold his like frantic DMs. And then when he was at the contest, obviously there was like Instagram streams of that or whatever. And so eventually they take mercy on them. And I can't remember the exact machinations, but they give tickets so this can happen. And eventually she gets to the concert. And of course, she realizes that she really wants the guy who's been helping her all along, which is super funny because she goes and finds the dude who she thought was Mr. Right all along, standing outside. She goes, I can't see you. This is not going to work. I knew who I love. Runs off. And then, like 5 minutes later, the girl he actually bought the Pentatonics tickets for, who he has dated like a normal human over the past year, comes up and she's like, who was that? So it's very funny all around, but it's nice to see that she couldn't force fate if she'd paid attention to the other guy she met at the diner that night. Duh. And they do also handle that. It's not like she was blind or had like an eye infection that year and wasn't seeing great. I mean, I think he was in like a Santa hat. And they both keep going. I think I know you. Did you go to my high school? So they know, like, especially he knows that he's seen her somewhere, but he can't figure out where it was. So then I guess we kind of are ramping towards the more insane ones. I mean, technically we had Holiday in Handcuffs as not that crazy, but I would say it's crazy, but at least physically possible. So the next jump is going to
Yeah,
be
so like this is
Christmas
our
Magic.
our stop on the way into what is going on here. So, like, this is within the realm of human possibility. It's just wild behavior.
Yeah. Well, this one's it's pretty old. It's from like 2008, I think, from what was ABC Family at the time, became Freeform. But it's Melissa Joan Hart of Sabrina the Teenage Witch and other things. Clarissa explains it all as well. And Mary Lopez, AC Slater from Saved by the Bell. So it's very 90s heavy in this movie. And basically, it's one of those where you see a lot in romance books, especially. It starts and it's the character's worst day ever, and her boyfriend breaks up with her, or she can't have the job, or she loses the promotion. In this case, Gertrude, her parents have set up a job interview for her because she doesn't have a serious job because she's an artiste and obviously she doesn't make any money. But she has a super big loft, so I guess her dad pays for it. It's not made clear. But she has this job interview, it goes completely awful. So then she goes to her job, which is her real job, waiting tables at an Indian restaurant, but that also has a big mishigas. And in the meanwhile, Mario Lopez, who's playing David, comes in with his fiance or something for dinner at the Indian restaurant. And I don't know, Trudy's at her breaking point. So she grabs, and this is true, a pistol off the wall that was sort of like a memorial real pistol from like some sort of Indian independence war from like 50 or 60 years prior, but still on the wall, and apparently it still can fire. I don't
And he
know.
has it loaded in his diner.
Yeah, no, a lot of this is super weird already, and this is literally the first 5 minutes. She abducts Mario Lopez, puts him in her car, and decides because her parents are expecting her to come home with at least a boyfriend since she blew the job off her because the guy was a friend of her father's, that she has to have something going for her. So she abducts him and says that David is now her boyfriend, and so she tries to like preface this so her family isn't confused or like alarmed or calls the cops by saying he likes to play silly practical jokes and he's really committed to this bit. You know how dad, you won't not let a joke die? He's like this. So he's just going to insist I abducted him. And her family buys it. And then also because they're kind of in this excluded family cabin in the woods, and the mom's like, no cell phones, that's not for together time. That's the way they can get him stuck there for a few days where he can't really get outside word yet, and where her family isn't going, holy crud, what did you do? We got to call the authorities and get this man out of here. But it's a lot. There's a lot going on in this Bonkersville. And
Like,
that's
this
just how
is
it
so
starts.
illegal. And everyone's reactions to everything is wild. Like the thing that her parents actually buy this thing that she said, okay, he just makes this joke about how I've abducted him when he's uncomfortable and just laugh and go along with it. And then that they're at the gas station and they run into that dirty bird guy who sees the guy in the handcuffs and he thinks that it's a sexual thing. Well, he's not in handcuffs yet. He's tied up. And he's like, ah, lucky guy, and gives them some furry handcuffs because he's into it. These people are so weird. And her grandma, who's like, I was on Broadway every time you see her.
Her grandma has a lot in common with a much better movie, um, Single All the Way on Netflix, where Jennifer Coolidge is the aunt who was like an understudy and sorta on
Oh,
Broadway
yeah.
if you squinted. But there is apparently a theme of Christmas movies where grandma was famous or almost famous and she has never shut up about it. But yeah, his grandmother or her grandmother, who's played by the woman who played the mother in Leave It to Beaver, by the way, because again, this is 20 years ago. Yeah, she's the I could have been the blah blah blah, and all of her speeches are really funny, but she's also like kind of really into alcohol, and she's really kind of she wouldn't be foul mouthed because it's an ABC Family movie, but you can tell if they were allowed to curse, she'd definitely be that grandma who curses a lot. So she just she's a pip. But yeah, none of these people believe him. None of these people think it's real. They all think it's this extended joke. And I'm like, for the first couple of hours, wouldn't you think something is super wrong? You've never met him. I guess it's hard to believe your daughter would abduct a human being at gunpoint, but also people don't tend to take jokes that far. They don't commit like they're like method actors for a weekend. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, the premise is pretty wild, and the way that they try to get around it is that her family is truly terrible to her, especially her father. And to the point that I feel like his mom is about to divorce him, like seconds away from divorcing this man. But he's so hard on the children, and to the point that he's gotten this interview for her, but then at Christmas, after they've done all the presents, he gives her a briefcase as a reminder,
Station.
you're a disappointment. And in between that, they give away all the things that she usually does to Slater, because AC Slater, because he's likable to them. So they see her being upset that they're excluding her from Christmas activities, but they're like, nah.
I
we're
love
gonna
how
do this because I like him
we're
better.
struggling so hard to remember his name is Mario Lopez. No offense, Mario Lopez. I'm sorry. Because like we don't keep calling her Sabrina, but we definitely keep calling him AC Slater. It's just it is what it is. Sometimes you're
I
just
don't
that dude
remember any
forever.
of the people's names in these movies, so
I
and I have
know,
it on
right?
Slater on my document here, so I probably
Yeah,
would have
no,
said
it's true. Well,
Sabrina.
he is,
Uh,
and he knows it. So that's, but he still has a job, and that's great for him. I think he does like stuff for Access Hollywood now or whatever.
Mr. Dimples
Yeah,
and
it's good. But like,
Teenage Witch.
I mean, to be fair, like in the universe of the movie, her art is supposed to be pretty decent. I mean, it's not my thing, but like theoretically, she's good at art, and her dad just doesn't appreciate that because he's a businessy business. Like one of the running jokes is that he had some old leftover golfing clothes lying around that are ugly because they're all plaid, but just happen to kind of mostly fit Mario Lopez. But he's that kind of guy. And to be super honest, he's played by the same actor who was in this short-lived Comedy Central show around the time of Bush years called That's My Bush. And so he
Hmm.
even kind of he has a very Republican look because he looks a little like George W. Bush, enough to have been the actor playing
I
him.
mean, they
So
sort
he's
of,
just
I was gonna say like that they talk about her being like flighty or like her something disparaging, and she says being a Democrat has nothing to do with that. So you get the strong feeling that her whole family are Republicans, except, well, maybe just the parents, because I'm getting the impression that none of the children are following that,
because I mean in
that
the
the
interim,
dad is so hard at them and the older son
yeah.
is afraid to come out to them.
And on top of that, like even the sister who's supposed to be in law school and doing like lawyery things, and I always got the gist she was good at it, but she didn't want to do anymore, so she quit. So this Christmas, like they all kind of are just done with their dad's crud, and they're like, I'm gay, I'm dating a guy, I like art, and her sister's confession is I quit law school. So like I think their dad just kind of broke them all, which is fine because he's pretty awful. But eventually, as things do, even though they're falling in love somehow, I guess again, I think Stockholm syndrome is part of it. But eventually, David is able to get word or steal a phone or get somewhere enough to get signal to let his fiance know to come get him. So the police break into their house, and then they all know what's happened. But because this is a Christmas movie, David decides not to press charges, and she goes free, so she's not in jail for kidnapping someone. Um, and so like a month or so passes, it gets closer to actual Christmas Day, and she goes to an art showing or something, and her brother, or like he comes to her art showing. Anyway, her brother's like, "Have you talked to him?" And eventually David shows up and he's like, "Look, I want to show you something." And he's bought storefront that's going to be an architecture and art gallery for them combined because he's an aspiring architect and she assumed he was rich and he wasn't. He was just working his way up this architecture firm and engaged the boss's daughter because he wanted to be someone who'd be trusted, not to just do the schlepping and the arranging of contracts on architecture, but to like do the designs himself. So they end up not just together, but in this way, the third theme in a row where her career is, in this case, not only not impacted, but actually helped by getting to know David. But you can see why this is super unrealistic because this literally starts with her abducting him at gunpoint and holding him
Yeah, she should
hostage
be
for
in
at least
jail.
3 days. Yeah, she should. She should.
Not only did it help her career, it helped her whole family because her parents clearly went to therapy, and then other children get to do what they want because they're not as crazy as she is. So
It was magical.
she
It's
did them a
super
favor.
weird, but it is on Hulu. It's still on Hulu. It's on Hulu all the time. I always whip it out every year, and it's not funny because it's written well, but it's hysterical because it is so bonkers. You just keep going, this can't get weirder, and then it's like shows what you know. Yes, we can. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty
Well, and Mario
legendarily
Lopez
insane.
does a good job of acting. I mean, I think he always does. Like it's there's a preponderance of wooden male love interests in
Yeah, he
these
is
kind of
naturally
movies.
charming, and he's better at it than most of them. Um,
Yeah. And
it's
I
just
find his character like he's fine. I mean, like he's not as well developed as some of them can be, but he's charming.
I do think it's interesting, and I don't know where to put this as a statement, but I did notice that for most of these Hallmark heroine types, and this is technically a different company, it was ABC Family at the time, but usually the rugged, square-jawed, brown-haired guy, he usually is a rich executive type dude, or he's a family farmer, or he has something that's his own business that's going for himself, whether it needs to be saved like the rec center or not is debatable depending on the plot. But it's interesting to me that Mario Lopez is the guy who's working at the firm working his way up, desperate to get like a real shot at an account, essentially. And then she assumes he's rich at the very beginning, says, "Oh, you're the guy who was in Beta whatever fraternity," and yada yada yada. And he eventually he comes clean to her, says, like, "You assume that about me, but my parents died when I was pretty young. I lived with my grandfather and I made my way through college like mowing lawns. And so I'm a really self-starter and trying to get ahead." And I think it's interesting that he's one of the only protagonists who's a guy I've seen in any of these movies over the last decade of watching them. And it doesn't escape me that the person saying this is a Hispanic actor playing a Hispanic coded character. Like it doesn't miss me that he's also got his way through college, right? Like doing yard work. Like it's not necessarily a thing one way or the other that's developed enough to be a theme, but it's just interesting to me that it's the one time that happens. So
Yeah. It's so common. Not on this list, actually. But maybe that's why I like these more, is that they're a little more down to earth, is that most of them aren't just businessy business. You got a fireman, you got a writer, you've got, I don't know, the task rabbit guy, and then um ghosts and snowmen. So
yeah, this
um
is where we're getting off the rail to this could happen, but why are you not in jail yet? To this literally is physically not possible because of magic. So the next one is called The Spirit of Christmas, and it's a little bit older, but I believe it's free on Amazon Prime if you want to stream it. And I think it's from 2014. And the basic gist is there's a haunted inn. This girl who works for a real estate firm is told to close the deal by Christmas with selling it because the trust doesn't want it anymore. She goes there. No one tells her it's haunted at first. The guy who's kind of the day caretaker says no one comes here during Christmas week. She does anyway, starts noticing a haunting. Eventually, she realizes or sees the full appearance of the apparition, who I cannot remember his name, but he used to be a rum runner during Prohibition. And so he got killed around that time. So it's the 1910s, 1920s. Every year for a year, he haunts the inn, but he doesn't haunt it like he's transparent. Like he is alive. He can eat, he can drink, he can enjoy things for like a week at Christmas around the time he died. Then I think the way it's implied is he kind of disappears for the other 51 weeks and isn't really anywhere, and then it starts all over again. So he is a ghost, but at this point he's also a physical manifestation. And so a lot of this plot turns around like, oh, you want to move on, let's figure out how you actually died, solve that mystery for you, and then you can ascend or go to heaven or go wherever you want to go so you're not trapped here for eternity. And that's what brings them together as a couple, is trying to solve his death.
I think that having a ghost as the love interest can be pretty wild, but then they've overcome this with, I don't know, ghost rules or whatever, and that he's allowed to physically be there during a certain amount of time. I feel like they ruined the ending on this one. That may be just me, but of like they've got this set up as once you accept that you can see dead people after they're actually dead, then you can kind of accept, okay, whatever your rules are for ghostliness, then do this and do that. They can do this, they can move on or not. And then that's the basis for setting up how you're going to interact with the ghost character. Otherwise, it has to be somewhat nebulous and no touchy. But
Exactly. And I think that is I feel like it's also a little bit of a cheat that because of the way him being a ghost works, that he's corporeal for a week at a time. I'm gonna be honest, when I think of a ghost or a spirit, yeah, you can make a physical effect on the world. You can like throw something if you're mad, like a poltergeist or like Patrick Swayze in Ghost takes a lot of effort. It's a little funny that when he's corporeal, he has a voracious appetite because he only gets to eat like once a year. That's kind of funny. The gist of like a ghost is that they can't touch things without a lot of effort, and they can't certainly can't feel things in return because it's a Christmas movie and not like a like more with pathos in it. But it kind of is a cheat if you're a ghost, but you have a body and you can feel and eat. I don't know. But also the fact that he doesn't actually end up ascending and ends up, I guess, even though he solves his murder, he gets to stay and then like be alive again or something. He doesn't
yeah,
disappear
I
and
don't
leave
buy
the
that.
property.
That's weird part of it.
So
Like if he's literally dead, man. Like that's the thing. And I think that they could have done it with him being incorporeal and then having one moment where like he knows how to de-ghost slightly so that they can kiss. But at the end where he just stops being a ghost and is alive again because he got the choice between his old girlfriend and his new girlfriend, and she's the old girlfriend is like, you make the choice, love, and then they wander off into the spirit world and he decides to stay with his new girlfriend. That's weird on so many levels. Of I don't know why I should be thinking about, would a ghost girlfriend be like, why don't you go back to life and date someone else after I had your child? Um, weird. And I thought that it would have made more sense if he just went off and she meets his great grandson or
grandson or
something,
something. Yeah,
happens to
because he
look like him,
does.
and is
He
less of a
died
sure.
not knowing he had a kid. So that is even possible. It's kind of written in because like he could have been a descendant. That he could have still had descendants even if he died young.
Yeah, I don't know. You make your own premise and your own rules, and it can work. I don't know that it does. Like, how do you feel about them as a couple? Because I don't remember that much about it,
I
even
think
though
that's
I
kind
only
of
watched it
why,
a couple days
right?
ago.
Like it's there's not a lot that like he does a good glower. He's very like I get why he's a ghost who died, so the actor is kind of having to play severe, but there isn't a lot of chemistry, and the actor himself doesn't have a lot to work with, but he doesn't bring anything else to it, if that makes sense. So there's not much to remember him by. So there's my way of saying as a couple they don't build a lot of chemistry because he just doesn't have a lot of personality. I don't know. It's a shortcoming of the movie that the premise is interesting, but it's played as they say really straight, really dramatic, and then the guy who's in it is really just kind of there. So as a couple, they don't really work. It just doesn't work for me. It just is an interesting idea, but I like that it. I really do feel like you do that. It kind of should have had that more again because it's Ghost bittersweet ending where he gets to ascend, he gets to go on to his afterlife, hopefully maybe with the woman he died before he could reunite with her, and then she gets to meet the descendant. But they didn't go that route, so maybe that's why it's
Yeah.
become more
And
apocryphal
to be
lore.
fair, like the reason I think that would work is because isn't her arc in this that she has to get over her previous relationship and put that to rest so she can move forward into something new?
Yeah, because they really characterize her as someone who's a workaholic who doesn't invest in relationships. And I don't know if that really changed because, in a way, getting him freed at the end was a way for her company to end up working with and selling off the end. So it also helped her business interest. I don't know. There is something to work with there, but I feel like it doesn't gel. It's just the only ghost premise I've ever seen in that way. So it's interesting because it's kind of like that. Oh, did you see that one? It's so bonkers. But when you actually sit down and watch it, it's not like played as bonkers, but it's also not played the way a typical ghost romance would be played. So it kind of ends up not doing anything that's memorable on its own.
You kind of need a few more things beyond the goofy premise. I think that there needs to be a little bit of depth there. There isn't always, and that's understandable because these are meant to be sort of, I don't know, popcorn around the couch kind of movies, is that they're meant to give you slight moments of entertainment before moving on the next one. They're not always that
Interchangeable
deep.
most of the time. Yeah. The Night Before Christmas, spelled Knight. So night like
Can they
night of
get
the round table. Yeah. Night like the Dark Knight, but not dark. Um, is the next one. And do you want to explain this one's plot a little bit? I mean, if we have the word
I'll
night in it, I guess
try.
people can start imagining where this goes, but
Yeah, starts in medieval England. A knight's doing some stuff. He finds himself in the woods, and there's an old crone who's so magical, and she's laughing like she's insane and sends him on a quest in the future. And he shows up there and gets hit by a car and meets this school teacher and tells her that he's a knight. And I guess his quest is to fall in love with her. So they have random events that occur, and then he succeeds by kissing her, and then gets sent back, and then he's sent forward, and happy ending. So as far as time travel romances go, I like this one better than Kate and Leopold, where why would any woman want to go back to a time where the medical industry is not as developed as it is now? Of like, it seems like a bad plan. But for the night going forward in time seems like a good one. Good bet.
yeah, no. This reminds me, it's not related to Christmas, but because he was in Back to the Future, they always asked Michael J. Fox, well, when would you want to go back in time to? He's like, not a time that didn't have penicillin. And I'm like,
Yeah.
good answer. There's a lot of things about the past I wouldn't want. I always joke that my version of that is I wouldn't have wanted to go back to a time before feminine products and Advil because no. But people like the idea of like the past was cool. But anyway, the night comes to our time. So he comes to enjoy all the things you can enjoy about a small town at Christmas, and he meets Vanessa Hudgens. It is Vanessa Hudgens, right? I get her and Selena
Yeah,
Gomez mixed
it
up.
is.
Sorry. I guess Vanessa Hudgens wishes she had Selena Gomez's career. I should, or, because she's on Only Murders in the Building. But yeah, so and then shenanigans ensue. I haven't seen this one in the last year or two, but she falls in love with him, and he has to try and get himself back to medieval England, from somewhere in America nowadays, and fulfill the curse or whatever the crone he thinks she wants so he can get poofed back
Yeah,
to
so
England.
it's basically set up as to be a true knight, he has to fulfill his quest, but he doesn't know what his quest is because your quest is supposed to hit at your greatest weakness, and he doesn't know what it is. So he does these heroic things like saving a little girl who's about to die on ice, and I don't know, smack talking her boyfriend. I can't remember what the deal was with Hutchinson's ex-boyfriend, but he's a jerk and she calls him a douchebag. Um, and he does something else heroic and he's that was not my true quest. And eventually his true quest, it turns out, is just to kiss her. So with all these hurdles that he's putting himself through to be a true knight, I guess that's opening himself up to being loved. Doesn't seem like the greatest knight thing that he could do. Like they could have set it up as he's falling in love with her, and then there is something that he needs to do to save someone. Oh, he also grabs a pickpocket at one point. So he's doing good things for the community and baking bread, all these things, but it doesn't get him sent home until he gives her a smooch. Um,
Yeah, and I don't have a lot to say about this one because it's one I don't remember as much. It's good. It's better effort out from Vanessa Hudgens than all the Christmas Switch movies, which we'll talk about a little later. But it is one of those ones where you're like, you kind of come on, you forget about them a couple hours later, just kind of one more piece in the content pile. For me, it
it's
felt like that. It goes through my brain.
it's entertaining and it's kind of funny. Like the only time he hits a level of cringe is when they're in the grocery store and he just starts tasting the rolls and putting them back in the better bag. But usually, like he's not that bad for someone who you literally pulled out of another time period to be in the current time period. He's just a little odd, slightly odd. It's like some guy very dedicated to LARPing. And
Yes.
so he
Yeah.
gets to experience the whole thing with technology and things like that and save them by baking bread for them. And it's cute. So I think it's entertaining while you're watching it, but it does not have any kind of deeper level to it. As we were looking at, okay, well, what's the deeper level to Meet Me Next Christmas? There is one. Nine Lives of Christmas, Brandon Routh really needs to get his shit together.
Yes, for
Mistletoe
the
Inn, I don't know that it has a deeper level, but it's relatable if you're an author. But like this one doesn't, as far as I remember, have that much going on the second level, at least not for him, because
no. I
he
don't
doesn't
think
need
Vanessa
to grow
Hudgens'
or anything. He's just a kind of a nice, funny guy.
character is in a place where she really has got that much going on either. I guess I'm not jumping the boat completely, but like if you go to a Christmas Prince, Rose McIver's character in that, who's the lead, is like she's kind of a reporter. I mean, she works for a tabloidish magazine or kind of like a magazine, and she wants to go from being more like the C-level stories to more A-list like features. And so this is her big break. So she has something at stake. But when I think about this movie, I mean, Vanessa Hudgens is hanging out with her family and maybe she's a little sad because she doesn't have a boyfriend at Christmas, but she doesn't have, like, I need to save the rec center or my career is on the, she doesn't really have something that's, or like I'm grieving someone who died of Christmas cancer or whatever. She doesn't have a bigger arc for herself either, where there's a lot at stake, it feels like, for either of them as character development.
Yeah, it's pretty low key. It's kind of like fanfic. If you're like, well, here are some interstitial moments and let's enjoy ourselves and then it's over.
I do feel like they wanted to get a sequel, but it just wasn't even popular by Netflix standards. Because there's definitely a beat where towards the end he does succeed. He goes back in time and gets back to England, but he eventually re-meets the crone in the woods, and she says, "What do you want?" And he ends up forever in modern times with Vanessa Hudgens because he loves her. But in the interim, when he's back for the second time in England, he meets his friend, and at the very end, like sort of the stinger before the credits roll, is his friend bumps into the crone, which I guess kind of would have been the implication that she had also helped this knight, match make for himself in the future or whatever, but that never actually happened. So, I mean,
Yeah,
I
I
guess a
just
lot of
can't get
people
over this
didn't buy
idea.
into it a lot.
There's this witch and her whole thing is she just yeets you into random parts of the timeline so that you can meet someone that you'll
I would
like.
totally dig
Uh,
that if like it wasn't always the same time. Like, sure, he got sent to modern day America in the suburbs, but like maybe his vassal friend would have ended up in the old West. You don't know. It's still the future to that dude.
it would be the future to that dude. It would be hilarious actually if
Yeah.
they did it that way. And then people would actually want to watch the series, but they didn't have another one. So
The next one's like stuck in the 1940s LA noir time. It could have been really weird. Like it's the future to you, isn't it? But yeah, no, it happened. It is a cute movie. It isn't grating. It's fluffy, but it is something where it doesn't. It's like the Chinese food of stupid Xmas movies because you don't really think about it after you finished eating it or seeing it or consuming it. It's there and then
Yeah.
gone. The one that has been taking social media by storm this Christmas and has been pretty popular, and I don't think I'll ever forget it, is called Hot Frosty. And it is exactly what you think it is by the title because they weren't going to, this is snakes on the plane logic. They're going to tell you what you're going to watch. Well, in Hot Frosty, Lacey Chabert from Mean Girls, but also a staple of many a made for TV Christmas movie. In her Netflix movie debut, because she's been Hallmark until they fired her for being too old, which I have a lot of feelings on, but it's not the space for this. But she puts a magical scarf. Well, she didn't know it's magical at the time. On a snow sculpture, not a snowman because he's got abs. And the scarf brings him to life. Then at first, the snowman, now snow person who's alive, is bumbling around, and he ends up. His name is Jack. He names himself Jack essentially because he accidentally breaks a window and he finds his way into a store and he steals the first pair of overalls
Yeah.
there, and the overalls say Jack on the pocket, so it's kind of a weird fashion statement to be selling, but okay. And he eventually finds her in the town square and she takes him in and they bond and he helps be her handyman around the house because her husband had died recently of the Christmas cancer. I say that not to be flippant to cancer, but because a lot of these movies have a trend of either a parent or a spouse who has died in the last few years due to some unnamed illness, but often it is sort of hinted it's cancer. And so this is oftentimes one of the plot points of these movies begins as, well, it's my first or second Christmas since I lost him and I'm just not in the Christmas spirit kind of thing. And she's definitely in that case of, I lost him. It's been a year maybe or two, but everything in the house has gone to pot. I haven't been keeping it up. I've got a leak in my roof. My heat doesn't really work, etc. So, well, she gets to bond with him. He also bonds with her by learning things from the TV, learning how to cook for her, which I never learned from TV, so he's smarter than me, and like fixing her house. And he gets a job as the janitor at a middle school. So they go to a middle school dance together, which is more romantic than it sounds and completely allowed. But in the meanwhile, because he did start his first day by accidentally breaking into a building, because he didn't mean to, he kind of fell against the glass and it opens up and he finds clothes. And he obviously doesn't know what crime is because he's a snowman. But the small town sheriff is like really keen on being the man of the law and taking him in. So the big sort of contretemps at the end is that the sheriff does arrest Jack, puts Jack in a holding cell, and it would go over the weekend until the judge could be called about this to like let him out or whatever. But Jack literally is a snowman. He's not made of snow anymore, but he's still cold in temperature. He can't eat hot foods. He can't drink tea. He can't be in a holding cell that isn't deeply, deeply air conditioned or freezing, or he'll literally melt, even though he has, pinkish looking flesh on the outside, which I don't know, wrap your mind around that. So the climax is spoilers, but the whole town gets together and they basically George Bailey their way with taking money from everybody volunteering because they all love Jack. He's great. He's around town. He's helping everybody. He's helping the middle school. He's helping old ladies be like excited to see him. But they take the plate, they offer their $600 or whatever you need to like let him out, blah, 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 blah. The final amount of money is donated by the sheriff's own son, being like, he's my friend. He helped me at middle school. And they let Jack out, but Jack's dying. So they think he dies. And then Lacey Chabert gives him a magical Christmas kiss, and then he's a real boy. And they end up together, and now he's human. And that's the movie.
So somebody
I
thought, what if we had somebody bonk Frosty? And that's the movie.
Yeah, you
Um,
said it way faster than me. Somehow I got into a whole nuance of it, but somehow they were like, let's take this concept of Born Sexy Yesterday, kind of like an Encino Man, George of the Jungle kind of naivete, but let's also marry it to the ending from It's a Wonderful Life, but also Pinocchio. And you get this, and he has abs, and that's kind of the movie.
Abs, the movie. Good
Had
shout outs for
abs.
secondary characters. I'll say Craig Robinson and Joe Truglio.
Sheriff
Various
deputy.
things, but they were both on Brooklyn Nine-Nine together, so they're really funny. Was the our police force in this
Give
basically
props
being their regular
to
characters.
Lauren Holly, who plays one of the older women in town. And one of that's why I say the older women get interested in him because like he helps her. He's on the roof,
Oh
shirtless,
yeah.
fixing Lacey Chabert's roof, and she sees him and she accidentally drives into a ditch. So he helps push her car out of the ditch, and then she introduces him to her old women's knitting circle or something. Anyway, they are very much rooting for him. So Lauren Holly is kind of, let's be honest, a little bit of a randy old lady in town is kind of funny. Like
Yeah, some
she does
very
stand out.
thirsty old ladies in this movie.
Real thirsty is very funny. I will say the weirdest part of this, and I know that doesn't make sense because the weirdest part is she wants to have sex with a snowman, but it's weirder for me that the town general practitioner is like on board with this right away. I mean, not even the sex part. I mean, literally, like she realizes Jack feels cold, so Lacey Chabert takes him to the doctor's office, and the doctor gives three different thermometers. Like he's like 30 degrees. She's like, maybe he's magically a snowman, and that's a big leap for someone who's literally supposed to be a doctor. But the whole town by the end is he's a magic snowman, except for Craig Robinson's like, you don't really believe that it's a magic snowman. I'm like, okay, you've
Yeah, they are
committed
just
and you
so on
believe
board with
it.
this. I feel like they knew he was a snowman before she fully believed it. They say
Oh, they
this
definitely
line,
did.
"A man that sweet has got to be magic." They're like, okay, has this happened before? I'm like,
Maybe. I mean,
what's
the
going
town
on
I
in this
think we
town?
noted was Hope Springs in our notes, and maybe they have a lot of random things come to life. Do we not know that? But they are like the world's most accepting town. They're super, yeah, of course he's a snowman. And I'm like, okay, but it works. It's ridiculous, but it has a lot of heart. I know that doesn't make sense, but for this plot, it actually is very sweet. She is literally going through some mourning and he does in his very innocent, I don't know a lot about the world yet, born sexy sort of innocent way, like make her feel better and help her explain some of what she's gone through. At some point he's helping clean out her basement, so he finds the medical bills and he asks her what cancer is, and so it gives her a chance to actually talk about how she's missed her husband and how hard it's been, but she hasn't really been able to talk to about with any of her friends in town, even the doctor who is her friend. So I think he gave her a chance to express grief in like a safe space. And I know that sounds dumb, but it does have a little bit more to it than just say a night before Christmas because she is allowed to go through this grief and find a way to heal. And that is actually really compelling. And he is just a really nice guy. Like it is really nice, like the town says, to see a guy this nice. There's often that trend in romance, even in the Hallmark movies, of the guy's a little gruff or he's got like issues or he's the CEO of the opposite company trying to buy out her family's inn. So he's got, if not an edge, then at least a worldliness to him. So it was really nice to see some guy who's just super nice. He's just super nice.
Yeah.
It's like a golden retriever came to life and had abs. That's the movie. So
Gosh, you just described a Jack Horseman character.
it's true, I did. I also thought like
Mr.
shit.
Peanut Butter.
It's as
Um,
if Mr. Peanut Butter had his own movie. There you go.
yeah,
So there are some other movies that are kind of
dishonorable
in,
mentions.
yeah, dishonorable mentions as far as like they're weird, but either they can't be found anymore as lost media, or maybe they're weird and not the way that you think is as entertaining as it could be. So I'll start with one that I swear is not a fever dream. It was from again the mid 2000s on ABC Family. It was made a year or two after The Holiday in Handcuffs with AC Slater and Sabrina the Teenage Witch. And it is called A Christmas Bounty Hunt. And it's basically about this girl whose family is essentially Dog the Bounty Hunter. All of them are bounty hunters in Jersey. And she has escaped that life, so to speak, by becoming a teacher at this preppy school in New York, but she gets called back to her family for one last job to help them. And so a bounty hunter who works for her dad, who she used to date and she just left behind, and she reconnect at Christmas. But it's kind of like, it's about Christmas, but if Snooki was a bounty hunter, because it's also around the time it came out, then the Jersey Shore was super popular. So it's just a hot mess of, oh my, what am I watching? But it was very delightful, but it is no longer available to buy or to watch on Hulu. So it's just gone. So, and then I guess if you're talking about Netflix, it tends to, maybe because it is Netflix, you have to pay for it, be more bonkers, not usually sexual, but more bonkers than a lot of the other types of movies out there, like Hallmark, its competitor. So there is also The Married Gentleman, which we'll talk about in a second really fast, but also there's the extended universe, as you call it, of Xmas movies, at least between Princess Switch and A Christmas Prince. Do you want to talk about those two movies a little bit? Midnight?
I don't know about that. The
Or
Princess
just
Switch
it
is basically a baker goes to a made-up country to be on a baking show and meets a prince as well as some royal lady who looks exactly like her, and they trade places for a while and fall in love with people. And then the Christmas Prince is a reporter from what is it, Now Beat magazine,
Yeah.
gets the opportunity to go cover a coronation in made-up Landia and decides to pretend to be the governess for Princess, and in the meantime falls in love with the Christmas Prince, and then they made three of them.
They
So,
made three of each. They made three Princess Switches. They made three Christmas Princes.
ugh,
This is true.
yeah, they're
And so you're
terrible.
saying, but Margaret, if the Princess Switch is about the princess switching places with this regular ass baker, what could be the other ones about? Well, they don't end up with four Vanessa Hudgenses, so they only end up with three. But the second Princess Switch introduces the princess's cousin, who's a duchess. And the duchess is like also kind of a scam artist, so she steals a lot, and she's her own sort of gang of thieves. So and she's kind of cockney-ish, I guess. She's not a totally posh Brit, but like it's a mess. So the third one is only about the redemption for like the third Vanessa Hudgens, who's the Duchess, who's like also a criminal and a con artist, and her like trying to do a heist to steal the Christmas star back for the country because it went missing, and she falls in love with it. It's a mess. It's a big mess of like way too many Vanessa Hudgenses, and that's the plot. And I like A Christmas Prince okay. I really like the first one. I think it's cute. I really think Rose McIver, and I think there's a reason she's so popular now on CBS's Ghost, which is a big hit for them, because she is a very charming, very interesting girl, and she's also really good, obviously, in iZombie earlier before. But the Prince part of the Christmas Prince is not very charismatic. And he also, as Midnight has pointed out many a time, gets more and more bald as the series goes along. So by the third one, you're like, oh goodness. Which I guess is very true to actual Prince William, or so there's that. The second one is like the royal marriage, and the third one's like the royal baby, and they're just not as interesting, and they're more about like, oh, it's hard being in the royal spotlight. It's just not as I don't know. They're just not as good. But they are interrelated. They make a point to point out that both of their made up countryas are like neighbors and are diplomatic partners and stuff. But then it gets weirder because then they drop hints in other movies of theirs that these made up kingdoms and principalities. I know the one that Christmas Prince is called Aldovia. I do not remember the name of the one in the Christmas Switch or Princess Switch, and I don't care. But they do have in The Merry Gentleman something where there's a flyer. The Merry Gentleman is the new Netflix one where it's basically the full Monty in a bar for Christmas. And I mean the movie. Or like Magic Mike, but at a Christmas time to save the family bar or whatever. Belgravia, thank you. Is the name of this Princess Switch country. But you'll see this weird flyer or like old newspaper clipping in the female lead when she goes to see her parents' bar in Merry Gentleman. There's just a newspaper clipping that says like Prince and Princess of Aldovia enjoyed their visit at this club. And you're like, you don't have to do that. You don't have to make it so most of your Christmas movies technically exist in the same universe because of these weird Easter eggs. I kind of understood why with the Princess Switch and the Christmas Prince they winked at it, and like I think in the wedding scene and the Princess Switch, they have a quick CGI of the people from the Christmas Prince in it as like part of the intending royals to the celebration. Because I mean, technically, they're Belgravia and Aldovia are countries next to each other, and again, diplomatic line like that makes sense. But it doesn't make sense that just randomly, if you blinked and missed it, there's a poster saying that at this bar 6 years ago, the Prince of Aldovia visited. Like it doesn't. I don't know where you're going with that. Like I don't know what the point is.
It's just, I don't know. I guess they thought it would be fun if you're fans of these movies. So if I'm not one, so then I don't know exactly what joy they feel when they realize that the Merry Gentleman is basically in the same universe. The reason you have an extended universe is to world build, and that's completely irrelevant to Merry Gentleman. And most of them, actually, the ones that are outside of those two trilogies, it doesn't really matter. So I
Yeah,
guess they figure why not? But at the same time, it's not like these people are ever going to cross over, which is the reason you need world building and you need the ability for these characters to meet each other. So then they're not going to
yeah.
do that.
I guess I thought it was funny just to do it. And like obviously you'd have to be me to notice that even matter and have watched all of this and be like inside baseball, but it's just kind of weird. I'm like, it doesn't really do anything. But I guess it doesn't really hurt anything either. Anyway, I will say about the Merry Gentleman, not much, because it's not very interesting. I guess my thing was I had high hopes for it because it's a really bonkers principle of like, oh, we'll just do the full Monty and they're gonna save her parents' bar, which is not like a creepy bar. It's not like some sort of peep show club. It's just been like a her parents are basically ex-hippies, and it's a music club. Like people who are like folk singers and jazz musicians would come in, but they're not getting the traffic they used to, so it's about to be closed. So she comes up with this idea because she is a dancer from New York and she's like a rockette, basically. They just can't say the word rockette. She comes in and she decides that they'll make money by having a gentleman's review, and it will be not a full strip, but like a burlesque kind of thing. They won't wear shirts, so they'll do kind of sexy numbers with their abs. It's a lot of abs this year at Netflix. I guess Netflix got thirsty. But for this premise, and with an good old CW WB stalwart alum of, to be fair, not just Chad Michael Murray, who's the lead dude with abs, but also in her own right, Britt Robinson was on different CW shows too. But like, it should be funny or tongue in cheek, and it's just not. So for all that premise and all that kind of mid-tier, not great acting talent, but enough to be familiar to people, you'd expect it to be really funny and really campy, kind of the way Hot Frosty doesn't take itself seriously, but they just decided not to do that. And it makes it distinctly less enjoyable because it's a premise that's ridiculous, but they don't treat it like it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think the part of the reason that you do one of these bonkers thought premises is to get people invested in something, to entertain them, to say, okay, I know this is kind of silly, but we watch these movies every year, so what about this? Hear me out. Sexy snowman,
Yeah,
sexy
exactly.
Rudolph, time travelers. Like, it just like, okay, why not? But my thing about the Merry Gentleman is I think it should have been a gay bar. But
Well, that's a good point. And it also well, because it is very, I mean, it's very homoerotically charged because it's all these dudes with no shirts on a stage dancing. Like, let's just be honest. And you could just lean into that because Netflix has had queer movies in the past, like Single All the Way, and they could just do it again. So we've gone through a lot of adventures, whether it's been Hallmark or Netflix or some of the really bonkers one that classic Freeform used to have. But I guess if there's any takeaways from these movies, I mean, they're not technically related to this is the process of writing, although I think we did establish some things about what are tropes or cliches within these kind of holiday romances that pop up. And I do think we mentioned a little bit, especially because of the way Mistletoe Inn is about a writer's conference, like what to expect at writers' conferences and how it gets them super wrong. But like, so you can take that as you will. But I guess if there's any takeaways from any of this, thinking about these, like at this point, almost a dozen Christmas movies we've rewatched this year to prep for it. What are your thoughts on any in general patterns, Midnight?
okay, so I have a couple of things here. One is that what I've noticed as we've talked about these is that regardless of the insanity of your prompt, you want to understand that you still need a core arc for your main characters, and whatever that happens to be, know that you're developing that alongside whatever hijinks you have that will give it a little bit more weight even as you're having fun. Another thing that they do where they are successful is that they really commit to the premise, and at the same time they're aware of the genre. So okay, Hot Frosty, the idea is stupid, but a lot of people like it because you just commit to it. You go with it. Okay, so they couldn't afford to CGI him literally melting, but he's almost dying and they have these moments and you just go with it, right? Of like you're not just like half-assedly throwing the concept in there. You're okay, this is our premise. Let's go for it. And then in the Nine Kittens of Christmas, they double down. Here are the cats getting involved. Then we have some of the other ones like Meet Me Next Christmas where they're really aware of the genre and like the things that would be happening in the genre and they put a slight twist on it. And then we remember that because we're aware of the tropes because we watch so many of the movies and you're like, oh, that was a neat thing to bring to it. So you can't take a few things away from when you see these kind of movies or any kind of movies doing something well of thinking about what you can do with your writing and how you can apply that.
I think that's a good point because, especially about the committing, because if you're going to have a bonkers point, you want to take the tone that goes with it. Like if you're making a sincere Christmas movie, there should be some sincerity to it. But if, again, like the difference between I think Hot Frosty versus Merry Gentleman is that one really runs with that idea and makes it crazy but heartfelt. The other one is just playing it super serious, which doesn't work for like essentially burlesque. And I also say that because Netflix, I don't know, they've kind of had an uneven year for Christmas related entertainment. Because I did enjoy Hot Frosty and I did enjoy Meet Me Next Christmas. But the flip side of that is I really did not like Mary Jane, but I also didn't like the one that came out last, which I was super rooting for Our Little Secret with Lindsay Lohan, which I only watched half of, and I was just watching it for fun. I didn't think it was going to fit this criteria for this podcast, but it was really bad because I think they took almost like a Family Stone, which is sort of a forgotten early 2000s movie. It's like a Thanksgiving or something, but everybody's mad at each other. And I think Sarah Jessica Parker and Rachel McAdams is in it. But I just remember it being like, oh, it's a realistic family movie because everybody's fighting. And it kind of has that tone for this movie with this year's Lindsay Lohan Netflix Christmas movie because in Our Little Secret, it's like she re-meets her ex-boyfriend or whatever, and now they're engaged to other people who are all part of this bigger extended family because the two people they're engaged to are brother and sister or whatever. And it's more about her not fitting into the family and trying to impress them. And Kristen Chenoweth, who's the matriarch, her fiance's father, is mean to her. And so it's really just about, oh, well, it's hard at Christmas because the in-laws are mean to us. And like, but people don't watch Christmas movies to be reminded of mean in-laws who make them feel poorly about themselves because we have those at home. Unless someone really wants a Christmas drama and they're digging into it, if you're trying to make a Christmas story or type product that you want to have more of an appeal and saleability, I think, as an author, then either you are very deliberate, especially in your branding and your decision to make it a very realistic kind of like, bittersweet Christmas story, or if you're gonna just do a general Christmas story or movie or book or whatever, just commit to it being a feel good thing. It's the one thing about the season. It's the one time we can have things that are feel good and happy and don't have to be cynical or true to life. And I think that as much as I wish it had gone differently, because I was very happy that Lindsay Lohan's kind of had a career resurgence lately with some of these Netflix movies, that Our Little Secret was just more realistic and a little bit more sad. And I feel like the flip side of that is also we watched the Sabrina Carpenter Netflix variety special for Christmas. And that one I just decided to, and maybe it's a Gen Z thing. I don't know. I'm 40, so what do I know? Decided to be ironically detached from Christmas and just like all snarky honestly didn't work for me. And it was just like, because mostly, even if it had been snarky, but effort had been put into it, I'd have cared. But a lot of it was just like, who cares? Like, I'm getting paid to do this kind of thing. But she's saying as a joke, but it feels like a lampshade for I was contractually obligated to make this. So you're going to watch the next 50 minutes regardless. I don't know. There's just a mean spirited to this. And I think in a world where everything is often so hard and so difficult and so dark, that we don't have to become ironically detached from just enjoying Christmas or holiday season in general, or a time where whether you celebrate Hanukkah or solstice or Diwali, you're allowed usually at this time of year in the United States to take a couple days off or a break or a breather with your family. We get so little chance to do that here that I don't need to start crapping on it as I'm too cool for that. Like I just don't need it. I don't think a lot of readers are really into that when they go into a holiday based, especially a wintertime based story. Yeah, but those are our
Discernment.
thoughts. Yeah, commit to it and you don't have to be super ironic about it. You could just sometimes you can just be genuine. But I thank you, Midnight, and we'll be back next time. So thank you. Thank you for joining the Otherlands Editing Podcast. Look for our next episode coming soon, and in the interim, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Also, if you want more information or want to connect, you can find Margaret Bates and Midnight Voss at our site, Otherlands Editing. Until next time, keep writing and keep refining your words.